So this session is one that I have put together years ago and was part of a large solution working group with Harry Kahneman and folks supporting very large solutions for things like military defense contractors, people building airplanes. And what my experience in working with companies trying to apply SAFe is that there were a lot of different patterns people were using to apply the large solution of SAFe. So I think that SAFe implies a certain level of complexity with the required elements, roles, etc. But I don't think that that's always required. So let's talk about the experiences that I've had, and I would love to have you inject also your questions and experiences. So we're going to talk about what does SAFe say is a large solution. I'm going to give two paths to a large solution with some examples. And we'll talk about the different challenges and considerations. Most notably, the more complex your system gets, the more you have to pay attention to what SAFe calls the solution intent. And we'll talk about that. And then I know you're surprised that I would put a flow chart in a presentation, but I did. So we'll conclude with that. Let me make sure I'm on time. So, this is SAFe's definition of a large solution. It's meant for enterprises that face the biggest challenges, as if you don't have big challenges, but building large-scale solutions, military defense systems. I worked with someone who was building the navigation system for nuclear submarines, pretty serious stuff. And it's beyond the scope of a single Agile release train, and that SAFe argues or offers that these solutions require additional roles and artifacts and events and coordination. And so they offer these graphics that make it seem like, oh, just the large solution layer is a little bit more stuff. And I'm going to show you my view of this thing I call the complexity explosion and see if it resonates with you. I started working with a colleague of mine, Wolfgang Brandhuber, talking about dynamic agility at the large solution level. Now, as we know from Don Reinertson, Principles of Product Development Flow, is, the bigger the batch size, the more variability. And I said, one Agile team is really only this big, and an Agile release train by definition is this big, but a large solution train can be huge. And I wanted a graphical representation of that complexity explosion that can happen. Now, I've worked with companies where thousands of people are working on a single airplane or a medical device. And so the amount of variability in the kinds of hardware, the kinds of compliance, the kinds of coordination that they need, the number of skills required to build such a system, it is a huge, huge, huge explosion. And there's a lot of variability. So let's talk about how you could get to a large solution, the path from Agile release trains to a large solution. Well, this is what we tend to think about. Like, I'm building an airplane and I've got an avionics system and I've got, the engines that are outsourced to Pratt Whitney, and I've got, landing gear, and I've got physical seats and lights and so many vendors, suppliers. And this is what we tend to think of in the way that SAFe describes it. And so we create this large solution because you can't just sell an airplane wing unless you're a vendor. But if you're Boeing or or Airbus, you have to you have to build the whole thing together, test the whole thing together, and sell it together. People are not, to my knowledge, assembling their own commercial aircraft at home. Now, my son once built a kit and built his own, experimental private plane. So the whole point is that there's a lot of variability in what people are doing and how it gets assembled into large solutions that people need. But SAFE says you create these large solution roles and backlogs, and you add this pre and post PI planning stuff and the sync meetings and the demos and the metrics, and we'll tell you all about how you can do that. But their success patterns at that level need a lot more consideration and tailoring than what we find at just, the agile release train of 50 to 125 people. Okay, so example of path one. This is Wolfgang and I both worked for a company that builds CT scanners and MRI tomography machines, and this is where we met. And this is a great example of a complex product. Is a MRI tomography machine built on nuclear medicine. And still, it's not just this one machine, right? You see this patient table here as a component. Well, they would use this same patient table that they're building across different product lines, whether it's a CAT scanner or MRI, et cetera. And so, yes, this is very complex. I had the opportunity to tour the manufacturing facility for this organization, and they're growing crystals and polishing crystals and, doing laser light through these crystals. It's crazy, the technology that's happening in various complex systems that we don't even know or appreciate. And unfortunately, our only insight comes when a door flies off of an airplane in the air. I don't know. So this is what we think of as examples of path one. But people who build these large complex systems, they already know that they've got a large solution. Or I've worked with an airplane manufacturer who called it an extra large layer they put in between large solution and portfolio. But what I want to talk about is what may be more applicable to you and most of the world, because it's my understanding, I've heard anecdotally, that really only 6 to 8% of the SAFE customers use large solution in the way that we just described. Instead, and I've worked with many companies where they form these multiple agile release trains one at a time, because that's how they think about the world and that's how they're organized. But then they have some cross dependencies across these agile release trains. And what do we do? Do we have to have a large solution backlog? Do we need capabilities? Do we have to have a solution train engineer and a solution architect? I would say I can't predict for you what's going to be most appropriate and make most economic sense given what you're doing. I've also worked in an organization, huge, 80,000 employees across 4 divisions, each division with 15 to 20 manufacturing sites, to the point on this last bullet, where at the highest level in that organization, they said, we are going to implement digital transformation in our manufacturing sites. Okay. And so they push down these initiatives with targets about when the manufacturing sites are going to implement, robotic manufacturing or digital work instructions and all the myriad of things you care about. But the problem is you get this tension between, wait a minute, we have contracts with customers, and, you know, we're delivering value. We are stream aligned in manufacturing, delivering value, and you're trying to push these initiatives down from on high that, and from your perspective, you're not taking into account how it impacts how we generate money for the organization. So there's a lot of different patterns that we can apply. And a good Agile Safe coach will say, well, let's talk about the goals and the economics, and let's start simple and see what we need to do. So I worked with an automotive component supplier based in Germany. My German friends would be happy to know. The world's largest, actually, producer of different automotive components. And in that organization, they supply these different components standalone, and they could supply one component at a time to an automaker, or they could be integrated into a comprehensive solution for an automaker. You know, Audi might come to them and say, yes, well, I want your infotainment system, but I want it to connect into this electronically controlled aspect of the engine, and et cetera, et cetera. So how do we represent that as a large solution when I'm assembling large solutions together based on a customer's specific requests? It's pretty complex. I also worked with an energy company in Houston, Texas, where they had IT infrastructure solutions, you know, WAN, LAN, Wi-Fi, security, a different art for providing desktops. Well, what happened when that company needed to stand up a new facility in another country, right? Well, then suddenly these infrastructure teams and arts had to collaborate together. But how often did they do that? Do we always need a large solution to do that? And then we also see enterprise support systems that, if you've got, let's just say SAP and financial, you know, other financial and Salesforce and other things, or you have insurance applications, policy provisioning, claims processing. This is from an example of an insurance company. How do we represent that? Are they all separate arts? Is there always a large solution? You see the questions we have to ask. So this is actually a graphic I took from that automotive parts manufacturer, something I created for them, but then I had to change it because I couldn't, you know, I couldn't tell you everything that they were building. But here's an example. What if I had a product line that's building airplanes, and they want to use some of my company's navigation, avionics, infotainment, and sometimes they want them integrated together, and sometimes they want their own. Maybe I have another portfolio with a virtual travel product line, right, with other elements. And so it gets very complex. So this is just my graphical representation of what I showed you earlier. Okay. So the challenges is we have to understand what exactly is our portfolio, who owns it, how, you know, is our real opportunity and challenge reuse across the Agile release trains, you know, like my medical devices that are using the same patient table component. And how do I structure solution intent? Don't you love solution intent? It's the supporting information like requirements, design, test cases and test results, which, you know, if I'm an automobile manufacturer, what I have to do in that regard may be different to deliver my products in the US or in Germany or in, you know, Asia Pacific. But usually the more complex the system gets, the more the regulators want me to have all of that supporting data to meet the compliance requirements. So there's a lot of challenges there. So fundamentally, though, it does come down to an architecture problem and solution. And this is where I love the Conway's Law, the reverse Conway's Law, that says, however your organization is structured, that's how your architecture is likely to evolve, and vice versa. If I need to refactor my architecture for reuse across arts or for regulatory compliance, then I should restructure or at least have flexibility in my teams, agile release trains, large solutions to work efficiently with the architecture of the solution. So we have to be very clear. What is the value? And that is where something like the portfolio canvas of SAFE is very helpful. I've just recently been reading profit streams, software profit streams, and the profit stream canvas has a lot of these same kind of elements. It just goes into more details of, what kind of licensing costs should we have? What's value versus cost versus profit for us? So SAFE offers you some of these things, but we have to be clear about the responsibilities and interactions between the Agile release trains. We are working on this ourselves within Zybert, where we have Agile Hive Data Center team, Agile Hive Cloud team, and we have Agile at Scale portfolio. Atlassian is asking us for more comprehensive solutions. So for instance, how does Agile Hive Cloud work with Report Builder and the templating app? And so, building those comprehensive solutions, who owns those? Who's going to maintain those? The care and feeding of the integrations between them. So who owns this customer solution requirements, the design, the support, etc. We have to have clarity on solution intent. I'm looking at my time box. There's 3 slides. I'm just going to show you that I have these slides, and I'm happy to share them with you later. But I come from an engineering lifecycle management world where you had to have requirements management and change management and quality management. One of the key things I did for that automotive supplier is I said, well, what kind of testing? Where are you going to have test suites and test reports, and how often are you going to run those, and how will team level test cases roll up into art level feature tests and integrated tests? So it can get very complicated, and we have to have a comprehensive view. Honestly, the work we do in Agile Hive is the work management. It's ostensibly it's transient. If you're an Agilist purist with a smaller team, you can say, oh, my features and stories represent my requirements. But larger, more complex systems need something more, and they need to persist that solution intent. So we need traceabilities up and down layers in each of those dimensions or domains, and we need traceability across the domains, right? When you have more and more complexity, you need more and more help managing that complexity. And although in this presentation, I'm not going into details about how Agile Hive supports these different patterns, we can go through that in a later session. So I always ask my customers, do we really need all those large solution constructs, the backlog, the solution train engineer, the solution architect, the solution management? So I would always ask them, taking an economic view, what percentage of thy backlog? That energy company, we said, listen, we only do that close collaboration across these arts maybe once a year, once every 2 years. So do we need a backlog for that? Probably not. Maybe we can have one art have the feature that with the dependencies across the art, and then you have something like an owning art, much like the owning teams that the Agile Hive Cloud just implemented. That's my sneak peek at Daniel's presentation for you. But what are the different opportunities? So I usually start out and say, listen, what if we only got people together and we said this art owns that initiative, and we did this in a less formal way? Could we achieve our goals in an economically reasonable way? And if people say, no, that's not going to work because we have to be cadence aligned. We have to be working on the same planning intervals in order to get that predictability and commitment across these arts. Okay, well then let's get all those arts on the same cadence and coordinate with the RTEs and PMs and have a more formal alignment cadence. Will that work? And my friends at Airbus would say, no, I can't build an airplane that way. So we would say, okay, then let's make it that large solution with all of the events and roles, et cetera, that we need. And so there's kind of a continuum. What do I need? We actually have a large bank that told us this week in Agile Hive Data Center that they use the capabilities of the large solution, just that one construct, to show and manage dependencies across the different teams. So, use what is value to you, but don't overdo it. So lastly, the decision flow is here to help you evaluate. Do we have some arts? Do the arts deliver value together? Yes. Is it primarily owned by one art and supported by the others? No. The value is primarily requested through higher level initiatives. Yes, maybe from the portfolio level. And is the frequency of higher level request frequent or rare? If it's frequent, right, you can see. So there's some thinking processes that you can apply to help understand, what do I really need that's of value? The biggest mistake we can make is we send people to SAFe training and they say, got to have a large solution layer. Well, that may not be the right choice for you. Okay, so that's the summary. I went a minute over, Daniel, and would love to hear from you with your questions. And if you want to follow up with me showing how these different patterns would work in Agile Hive. That concludes this expert session.